Castle, Fire and Blade. Hello everyone. Tonight we relax with a story about royal deaths that are never explained. You lie down on your familiar pillow, but your mind still wanders to the cold stone corridors where candles burn forever and secrets are hidden in every brick. Imagine you are a servant walking slowly through the mist, holding a fish oil lantern, and then what sound just broke in your ears? History isn't always a heroic tale. Sometimes it's a crime story written in red ink. You probably wouldn't survive being born into medieval royalty. Thrones had no cushions, only thorns. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. Leave your location and local time too. Now turn off the lights, turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's start our night journey together. You walk through the north gate of Lancaster Castle one night in 1327. The crescent moon is slowly rising. Rumors are circulating that King Edward II, who has ruled England for nearly 2 decades, has died in his cell at Berkeley Castle. Officially, he died of malaria. But when you look into the eyes of your courtiers, when they avert their gazes, you know something is wrong. You follow the cold corridor, where the wind filters through the cracks in the stone like the breath of the dead. The cell has only one entrance, an iron door locked from the outside. And inside, Edward is found on the bed, his body without any obvious injuries. A broken candle on the floor, a strange indentation on his chest. This is a true story. King Edward II really did die that September. But what is the truth? Some say he was tortured with a red-hot iron, inserted into his sensitive areas, so that no external marks would be left. Sounds creepy. Yes, because it might not be true. But who can say for sure? Historians still debate whether Edward actually died in 1327, or was rescued by loyalists and taken to Europe to live incognito. A handwritten letter was later discovered, stating he lives and is protected in a French monastery. Rumor? Or is it something the history books deliberately suppressed? Remember the smell of burnt fish in the stone kitchen? That day, a cook heard screams from the basement, but was gagged before he could tell anyone. A week later, he slipped and died in the wine tank. Fun fact, Edward II's cell was actually built right above a wine cellar, possibly to make things easier to get away with quickly. You sit down in the old chair in the corner, your hands shaking as you hold the death certificate. Cause: natural causes. But you look at the signature at the bottom of the paper. Someone who died last year. What does that mean? Some nights, castle guards would hear heavy footsteps in the empty cell. Some swore they saw a figure in a black cloak walking down the hallway, holding a candle that was dripping wax onto the ground. You begin to understand. In the palace, death is not always the end. Sometimes, it is the beginning of a mystery that will outlive the person lying on the cold ground. The night was deep. The lights in the castle were extinguished, as eyes closed in fear. But the story had only just begun. Blood wedding in Navarre. Remember when you attended a wedding where the wedding cake fell to the floor and the bride burst into tears? Now imagine that version, but instead of tears, blood foamed out of the royal bride's mouth. You are standing in the middle of a Pamplona square, the year 1234, where flags are flying and church bells are ringing. Today is the wedding day of Princess Blanca of Navarre, a princess raised on goat's milk, the Bible, and gentle curses from her stepmother. You are one of hundreds of servants drafted to serve in the royal banquet. The smell of roast meat, honey wine, and pollen intoxicates you. The crowd is cheerful, and lyres are playing from an old European orchestra. But you sense something is wrong. A crow circles the platform 3 times and flies straight into the bell tower. At the time, you tell yourself it's just bad luck. The bride Blanca stepped out in a pearl-colored silk gown, her hair braided like golden ropes and her eyes moist. The groom was Prince Theobald, a champagne nobleman with a smile as beautiful as old wine. You stand near the main serving table, holding a tray of blood-red wine. When Blanca raises her glass to toast, you see her hand shake slightly, as if something is wrong in the air. Everyone raises their glasses. She drinks, and then you hear a sound you will never forget, a low grunt. Then the glass shatters, and she collapses into her wedding dress. Wedding party turned into funeral. Historical event true? Yes. Princess Blanca did die in the year of her wedding, and the official cause was sudden death from unknown causes. Some texts suggest that she had a heart condition, but conflicting church records speak of an unholy death. The strange truth: the food at the banquet was prepared by a Sicilian chef who disappeared shortly after the wedding and was never found. Another small detail: the food. Keeper had added an unusual ingredient, belladonna, a beautiful and deadly flower. Was it a mistake in the records? Or was there a confession hidden in the ink? You recall an early royal dispute. Blanca had been betrothed to another king, who later became an enemy of the Navarre family. Historians still debate whether Blanca was the victim of international political intrigue, or simply a weak-hearted girl who was hurt by the pressure to marry. You sit in the corner of the garden where the wedding is taking place, watching the lantern sway in the wind. A child runs by, singing a nursery rhyme. The princess gets married, drinks blood, wine, sleeps forever under the painful sky. No one taught her that song. No one knows where she learned it. You walk into the room where Blanca used to live and see a small mirror hidden behind a curtain. There are light fingernail scratches on the mirror, as if she tried to say something before she left. In the middle of the pillow is a dried flower, also a belladonna, pressed thin and falling petal by petal. A bell tolled. The funeral was quiet. No state funeral, no band. A servant whispered, "They want people to forget." But you can't. Remember the fallen wedding cake? Maybe that was a sign. And the last thing you hear before you leave is a whisper from the stone wall. Blanca is not yet asleep. Death on the saddle. Have you ever ridden a horse? Not in a video game, but the real kind. Sitting on a creature the size of a refrigerator, with legs like tree stumps, and whose every sneeze can send you flying off the saddle like a roasted chestnut. Now imagine that, but replace the horse with a European steed, armored and trained to stomp on its enemies without blinking an eye. Yes, you're sitting on it, but this time in the middle of a royal hunt. You are in Windsor, on a misty morning in 1284. The woods are as damp as a forgotten washcloth. With you is Prince Edward, son of King Edward I. Who would have been Edward II if, well, you know. The hunt was noisy. Horns, hounds, hooves, and the smell of sunburned leather. Prince Edward, then only 15, was riding a Flemish stallion, beautiful, tall, and dangerous as a lady with a knife in her bodice. You noticed he was riding a little off-center, as if something was wrong. And then, halfway down the bend near the stream, he suddenly leaned back. No scream, no struggle. Just fell. His head hit a rock. Everything stopped. This event, it actually happened. Some chronicles record Prince Edward as having a hunting accident. The timing and location are conflicting. One version says he was thrown from his horse in the palace courtyard. Another says he died in bed of an infection. But most agree the initial fall was the cause. Interesting, the horse was a gift from a Welsh lord, a notorious anti-royalist. Coincidence, perhaps. But who would give a prince a horse that wasn't fully tamed? You stand silently beside the horse, which was killed shortly afterwards, checking. But you see something everyone else misses. The saddle has been cut slightly below the belly, right where the harness connects, as if someone wanted it to loosen. so that he could slip off the saddle at that fateful moment. Historians still debate whether Edward's fall was an accident or a plot to prevent him from becoming king. A recent group of scholars even theorizes that Edward didn't die that day, but suffered a severe brain injury that made his subsequent decisions about his accession to the throne erratic and led to his overthrow in 1327. Yes, that death in part 1. See, it all starts to connect. You return to the palace with the rest of the party. Everyone is silent. Some are in tears, but some are too calm. One courtier takes out a handkerchief to wipe his glasses. You hear him mumble, "At least England has a second prince." A week later, while inspecting the saddle, the blacksmith discovered that the clasp had been worn down to the point where it could easily come loose if the horse turned abruptly. But the official report made no mention of this. The crown prince died in an unfortunate accident. The end. Do you remember the smell of damp oak leaves and the cawing of crows that day? It was like a whisper from the deep forest. Accident does not mean that no one wanted it to happen. A funny joke. After Edward's death, the king banned all Welsh stallions from entering the royal palace. But just a year later, he gifted the very same horse to the earl he hated the most. Revenge, or a chance. That night, you dream that you are back in the saddle, but the ground keeps tilting, and you never know when the fall will come. Death in the Salt Tower. Remember when someone told you that salt was white gold in the Middle Ages? Well, if so, then the Tower of London is the killer safe. You're in England, 1399. Winter has just set in, and the Thames is lightly frozen at its edges. You're the salt keeper in the Tower of London. One of those jobs that sounds boring but is actually incredibly important. Because back then, salt wasn't just for seasoning soup. It kept meat from rotting, sauerkraut from turning sour, and corpses from looking less weird. The Tower of London is more than a fortress. It is a prison, a treasure trove, and a mandatory retreat for fallen royalty. And this time, the retreat is Richard II, the king who once ruled England as a child and was allowed to hold a real sword. You are ordered to deliver salt to the basement near Richard's cell. Rumor has it that the king has been deposed and replaced by Henry Bolingbroke, his cousin, and the man who sometimes dreams of the throne during his naps. Richard II is well guarded, but you can hear his footsteps pacing back and forth, the saddest sound you've ever heard through the cold stone. You set down the salt bucket and overhear a brief conversation between two guards. He hasn't eaten for 3 days. He probably doesn't want to, or he doesn't dare. Historical event: Richard II did die in the Tower of London after being deposed in 1399. The official cause: starvation or voluntary starvation. But who would starve to death amid salt and grain stores better protected than gold? Strange fact: the food inventory records show that Richard's rations were reduced day by day. The first day was black bread and cold meat. The third day was only porridge and salt water. The fifth day, the note simply read, "No service required." You see a small, gaunt figure pass through the crack of light. Richard's eyes are sunken. His beard is scraggly like gnawed grass. He sits in a corner, talking to the mouse. You hear him whisper, "You're lucky you don't have to wear a crown." One day, you find a note stuck in the lid of a salt barrel. He won't live past a week. Guaranteed not to spill a drop of blood. No name, no signature, but enough to make you choke on salt dust. Historians still debate whether Richard died from a true hunger strike or from slow poisoning. Some theories suggest he was fed excessive amounts of salt, leading to dehydration, delirium, and a silent death. A clean punishment. No beheading, no blood, just time. Remember the story about the ice cream that tasted like crocodile poop? Well, Now imagine a king dying a slow death from salt, the stuff we now have on hand when making fried eggs. A guard was once removed from the tower for talking too much. You find him in a Southwark pub. In a drunken stupor, he says, "One night I heard him singing not in English, in something ancient, like he was calling for someone to come and take him away." When Richard's body was taken out of the tower, it was wrapped tightly, and no one was allowed to open it. An old woman passing by exclaimed, "There's no smell, only silence." And everyone was silent. One last ironic joke. A few months later, the Salt Tower, where you worked, is converted into a gun store. It's less dangerous, they say. You laugh, but only in your head. Tonight, as you stand by the river, the wind from the tower blows, chilling you to the bone. You swear you hear a whisper. The salt in your eyes isn't from crying. Weddings, daggers, and toilets. You thought weddings were all fun, cake, fireworks, and some ain't crying tears of joy. Well, welcome to the year 1441, where a royal wedding can end in blood, sewage, and one fateful slip. You're in Edinburgh, in a stone castle as cold as a broken freezer, and today is the wedding day of Princess Margaret of Scotland and King Louis of France, at least in theory. The wedding is a formality. Margaret is only 12 and will be sent to France when she comes of age. But the party is real. The mead flows like a waterfall. There's singing and dancing, and the food looks like Stone Age weapons. You're one of the assistants who handles the service, behind the scenes. No one knows your name, and that's what makes you dangerous. You hear everything from the blessing to the clanking of knives in your sleeves. While the party was in full swing, an English noble, Earl Radcliffe, was present as a neutral guest. But as everyone knows, there was nothing neutral between England and Scotland at that time except enmity. Radcliffe disappears in the middle of a party. You're told to find him because the servant is alarmed. He says he needs to go somewhere private. In this castle, the toilet is a wooden hole on the upper floor, called a garderobe, basically a hole straight down into wet nothingness. You climb the stone stairs, hurried by the strange smell. The door to the garderobe is wide open. There is no sound of water, no breathing. You look down and see a boot at the bottom. The official facts: Earl Radcliffe is recorded as missing during a diplomatic trip in 1441. There is no hard evidence of his death, only bizarre rumors. Some accounts say he was murdered. Some say he fell while drunk. But no body has been found. Strange fact: a few days later, the janitor found a broken dagger blade and dried blood on the wooden bar that blocked the toilet. Yes, you read that right. It looked like he had been pushed and probably tried to hang on to the edge. But someone had used a knife to help him decide. You touched the handle of the knife. It was engraved with a lily, the symbol of French royalty. Well, why would the French want to kill an English noble? Or was someone trying to? Historians still argue. Some believe Radcliffe was a spy who was discovered. Others think he knew a secret about the Franco-Scottish alliance and was silenced. One scholar recently proposed a very unsanitary theory. Radcliffe was poisoned, falling into the toilet with severe stomach pains. But what about the dagger? You look back at the party. A servant sneaks down the hall. A princess purses her lips when she hears that a guest has disappeared. A priest quietly closes his notebook and says, "God sees everything, but he doesn't always tell." An old joke the guards used to tell. Want to bury a royal secret? Throw it in the toilet. The smell is strong enough to drown out any whispers. You let out a small laugh, then find yourself shaking slightly. That night, you stand alone on the tower. The moon reflects on the stone courtyard. The wind carries a strange echo, as if someone is still falling and forever never reaching the bottom. Castle on fire, armor melted. Ever imagined wearing a suit of armor would make you invulnerable, and then playing hide and seek in a burning kitchen? Then congratulations, you're the Duke of Clarence, and today is the day you melt like cheese on toast. You are in the castle of Rouen, 1460, in the midst of the War of the Roses, a cold-blooded family battle that smells of freshly minted silver. Clarence is a man with a dangerous habit, trusting his brother, betraying his brother, and thinking he is smarter than both. Today, you are the one in charge of cleaning the halls, listening to everything and saying yes. No one is listening. You watch Clarence as he signs a secret letter promising to betray the Lancaster faction for the third time this month. You think, if betrayal were a trade, he would be a master. That evening, Clarence went to sleep in his armor. There were rumors that there would be an assassination that night. For safety, he locked the door, drew the curtains, and lit the fire to keep warm. Very warm. Very wrong. Around midnight, a loud bang shakes the stained glass. You run to find Clarence's door glowing red. Someone shouts, "Fire!" A guard panics. The door can't be opened. He locked it from the inside. Historically accurate, it is recorded that a fire broke out in Rouen while Clarence was there, and he was seriously injured. There is no clear report, but Clarence then abruptly withdrew from the battlefield and never really returned. Strange fact, a military doctor noted that Clarence's back was covered with round, shield-like burns, with peeling skin and a smell of burning metal. And his chamberlain swore he heard him scream, "Armor, it's cooking me alive." You see the armor pulled out after the fire. The chest is curved like a pressure cooker lid, and the lining is stuck to the flesh. You might be thinking, what's the difference between wearing a suit of armor in a locked room, locking the door, and lighting a fire and putting it on the stove? Yes, Clarence did stew himself. Historians still debate. Some believe it was a stupid accident. Others believe someone stuffed coal into the air ducts, deliberately smoking out the nobility. A more extreme conspiracy theory says Clarence was fixed by his own faction because he was too treacherous to survive. Army joke. You want tender meat? Season it with treachery. Cook it with pride. Everyone laughed, except the cleaner in Clarence's room, who discovered the burned map with the names of the castle sold. You stand in a smoky room, smelling burning iron, burning cloth, burning people. In one corner of the room, handprints are still on the wall, black and shrinking, as if someone tried to crawl to the door. A few weeks later, Clarence left the battlefield. People said he had retired to become a monk. You know what? He no longer wore armor. Ever. Remember when sunscreen stuck to your skin and wouldn't wash off all day? Now imagine wearing it all over your body, then putting it in a pizza oven. That night, as you clear the ashes, you hear the sound of metal clanking in the wind. A fireplace, a rusty lock, and someone whispering, "I just want to be warm." The petrified woman on Easter. Think Easter is all about dressing up, taking pictures, and eating chocolate eggs until your stomach hurts? In 1483, you learned a hard lesson. The eggs may be hollow, but the people turn to stone. You are at Lincoln Cathedral, where the royal family is celebrating Mass, and you are, as usual, the invisible man in the frayed cape, dusting the pedestals of saints. The Duchess of Pembroke, Lady Cecily, made her appearance that day. She was of Welsh descent, sternly beautiful, and famous for a voice that made one feel compelled to confess. The ceremony was conducted in the most solemn manner. Incense filled the air. Church bells rang out like political debates at the banquet table. As the music played, Lady Cecily approached the main altar, knelt, and, just as the priest raised his hands for the blessing, she froze. Not breathless, but not breathing. You see it. Her face freezes in mid-prayer. Her hands are frozen like statues. And when they try to lift her up, her skirt falls, clack, and someone says, "Holy shit, it's ice cold." The historical event is recorded as follows. In 1483, a noblewoman fell dead during Easter in Lincoln. There was no autopsy, and the monk's note read, "God took her soul, and it seems her body too." Strange fact, the body was left in the church's stone vault. When it was opened for reburial a few years later, it was discovered that her body had barely decomposed. Her hand was still clutching the rosary. Her skin was cold and smooth as marble. Rumor has it, she didn't rot. She was kept. Have you ever seen limestone at statues? Cold, smooth, silent. You look at her and can't help but think of the Medusa story. But the Anglican version, historians still debate. Some suspect mercury poisoning, which was commonly used in cosmetics at the time. Others point to a rare heart disorder called frozen shock syndrome. But there's also a more chilling theory, that she swore against her marriage vows to King Edward and was sanctified in the most undesirable sense. You heard the priests whispering that night as the church closed. They said, "The soul does not go up, nor does it go down. It stays, waiting for the next person to betray the altar." A strange joke spread among the people. Want to be a model wife? Stand still, beautiful as a statue, like Lady Cecily. A few weeks later, you dust off the Virgin Mary and notice there's a new statue, nameless, without a halo, near the back door of the church, holding a rosary, a realistically draped stone skirt. And when you look closely, you see an unusual detail, a fingernail engraved with fiat, Latin for will. But who wrote it, and when? You shiver. The wind blows through the stained glass. The bells ring long, and you wonder, if petrification is a punishment, then who gave the order? Now, every Easter, you stay away from that altar. No matter who invites you to Mass, you just smile and say, "I prefer boiled eggs to cursed eggs." The Last Supper with poisonous stew. Remember that time you ate stew that had been in the fridge for 3 days? And you survived? Congratulations. Because if you were Queen Joanna of Castile, you wouldn't be so lucky. Even if your stew was cooked by the royal chef and served in a silver pot inlaid with jewels. It's the fall of 1504. You're in Toledo, Spain, in a castle too big to feel warm and too quiet to be believable. Queen Joanna, nicknamed Joanna La Loca, Mad Joanna, has just returned from a long, tiring trip and seems not entirely sane. That evening, a small party is held. Only a few close friends. You are the maid who silently brings the wine and clears the napkins, and you have sharper ears than a kitchen rat. You hear the queen whisper as she sits down, "Tonight, I want to eat something safe." The main course was a venison stew with rare mushrooms, prepared by head chef Juan de Oliveras himself. Rumor has it that the mushrooms were picked from the nearby convent's private garden, the kind that grows only in the moonlight, and that the nuns used to induce dreams. Joanna ate 1, 2, 3 spoonfuls. Then she stopped. After a while, she stood up quietly, her eyes seeming to penetrate the wall. No one said anything. Then she laughed, a laugh long and soft, until there was no more sound. She fell back down. Her eyes were still open. Historical event? True. Joanna began to suffer from severe mental disorders around the time of the death of her mother, Queen Isabella. Many accounts describe her as having extreme reactions to food and servants. That night, a night that is barely officially recorded, is believed to have marked the beginning of her nearly half-century-long imprisonment. Strange fact? Internal notes from the kitchen said, there was nothing left to taste the stew. A servant who tasted it later hallucinated for 3 days, but did not die. Only Joanna completely collapsed after that meal, physically and mentally. Remember the story of the ancient ceremonial magic mushroom? That mushroom, Amanita muscaria, can induce delirium, stupor, and even temporary insanity. But it doesn't kill. So what else is in that stew? Historians debate. Some believe that Joanna was actually suffering from schizophrenia, and that her attack coincided with the meal. Others suspect a low dose of poisoning, a mixture that would easily make a strong woman mad without killing her. And there's a conspiracy theory that Ferdinand, Joanna's father, orchestrated the removal of his daughter from the throne. Court jokes, eating the queen's stew, only if you're willing to listen to the whispers of the tables. You, the person who wiped the dishes after that party, remember clearly. The silver spoon still had teeth marks on it. The bowl was empty, but the bottom had a layer of gray powder, slightly slimy, like wet sand. That night, Joanna did not sleep. She walked around the castle, whispering to the candlesticks, singing to the chairs, and finally sat in front of the mirror, staring at herself until morning. After that, she was no longer the ruling queen. She became a prisoner of the royal family, confined to the Tordesillas convent for the next 46 years. Every night, she would request, "Bring me stew of that kind." You stand by the door, listening to the words over and over again, and you wonder, is death not necessarily about stopping breathing? Maybe death is more terrifying, being trapped inside your own mind, with a spoon and the memory of a stew that will never melt. The coffin never lies still. Ever seen a video of a coffin floating away during a flood? Funny, right? Now imagine living in 1812, in a completely sealed stone mausoleum. No water, no wind, no rats, and the coffin still moves. You are in Barbados, a Caribbean island in the British Empire, where the Chase family, a British aristocratic family, has built an opulent mausoleum out of coral stone. You, the sleepy gravekeeper, live in a small shack nearby, paid in rye bread and weak rum. The story begins when Mary Ann Chase, the young daughter, died in 1807. Her coffin was made of lead, very heavy. She was placed in the mausoleum with great ceremony. All was silent until her sister, Dorcas, died a few years later. And when the family opened the mausoleum to bring in more coffins, they discovered the first thing no one wanted to see. Mary Ann's coffin had been turned upside down, lying diagonally across the room. There was no sign of forced entry, no cracks, but a whisper in the wind. Mary Ann doesn't want to be here alone. When their father, Thomas Chase, a hot-tempered and notoriously ruthless aristocrat, died next, his coffin was so heavy that 4 men could not carry it and had to use a sledge. They placed it in the mausoleum, adjusted every position, and sealed the door with cement. The next time the door opened, all the coffins were upside down. One hit the wall, one stood upright, and Thomas Chase's coffin was pushed right up against the door as if trying to escape. Official historical event? Yes. The incident was recorded and investigated by the governor of Barbados. The tomb was opened in front of witnesses including military officers, stonemasons, priests, and you. They locked it, sealed it with wax, and put powder around the door to check for footprints. When he returned the next time, all the coffins were disturbed again. The seals were intact. No footprints, no rats, no reason. Strange fact, all the coffins were made of lead, weighed hundreds of pounds, and couldn't be moved by rats, wind, or water. One theory is that toxic gases built up and caused the shaking, but only inside, and shaking enough to keep the coffin upright. Historians still debate the story. Some believe in an unexplained physical trick. Others believe that family members played a bizarre prank to test the faith of locals. There is also the theory, never officially acknowledged, that a spirit inside refused to accept the rest. Village joke? Want to rest in peace? Don't be buried next to Chase's house. You, the grave guard, begin to avoid the tomb at night. The noises, clack, bang, still resound every night of the full moon. One day, you get closer and see a small handprint on a stone door. Not deep, just a streak of gray dust, but there are 5 fingers, and the 5th one is unusually long. Finally, the authorities decided enough was enough. All the coffins were removed from the mausoleum. The mausoleum was abandoned. The doors were sealed permanently with concrete. No one was buried there anymore. You live, grow old, and sometimes tell the story in the pub, but no one believes you, unless they've heard the thump from the ground on moonless nights. And you wonder, if the coffin can move when no one is looking, then what awaits the moment you close your eyes, and the door is no longer sealed? Dungeon Ghost, Headless Leader. Have you ever heard the ghost story of the Headless Man? Perhaps, but not everyone has witnessed the apparition gliding through the dungeons of Leeds Castle, Yorkshire, England. And you, the one who has to clean the corridors around those cold cells, will know that this is not a story for the faint of heart. It is the late 16th century, during the turbulent times of the Tudor dynasty. Leader Robert Aske, leader of the Pilgrimage of Grace rebellion against King Henry VIII, has been captured and sentenced to death. But his story does not end with his head falling off. You shuffle down a dark hallway, your shoes clicking against the cold stone floor. Suddenly, a cold wind blows past your neck, even though the windows are closed. A figure appears, headless, speechless, just a fluttering black cloak and steady feet. You tremble, trying to keep your balance on the damp ground. Historical fact, Robert Aske was executed in 1537. His head was cut off and displayed on a stake as a warning to other rebels. Centuries later, many people reported seeing his ghost at the place where he was held, Leeds Castle. Strange fact, modern research has found that the temperature around the area drops suddenly when the ghost appears, creating a chilling feeling down the spine. It is also said that at times he stood next to other prisoners, but no one heard his voice or felt his breathing. Historians still debate whether this is a manifestation of lingering sin and suffering, or simply a natural phenomenon caused by a combination of light and humidity. Some even believe that this is just a hoax to attract tourists. You know, every ghost story has its own humor. It is said that one night, a new guard saw a ghost for the first time, was so scared that he screamed and fell down, making the whole group of visitors think they were watching a comedy show. You walk in the darkness, wondering, if the headless leader can still roam, what else is there in royal history that you don't know about? Could it be that the past is unwilling to sleep, and you are the one who will wake up with it? You have just been on a journey through the terrifying mysteries of royal deaths in the Middle Ages and beyond. From the panic and darkness in the palace, where food can turn into death or magic mushrooms cause the mind and body to break down, to the murders in the mausoleum with moving coffins, and finally the headless ghost of the rebel leader, haunting the cold dungeon corridors. Each part of the story incorporates an authentic historical event, bringing you closer to the reality each of them faced. The strange and inexplicable details make you question the boundaries between life and death, truth and legend. Historians still debate, searching for answers to the mysteries you have just witnessed in the story. Throughout the journey, you are guided by a gentle voice, laced with irony and humor, making the story both engaging and easy to digest before you drift off to sleep. Vivid images of deadly dishes, moving coffins, and silent ghosts invite you to step deeper into the darkness of history. And now, with the lights off and the fans still gently spinning, you can rest assured that no matter how spooky the past was, Everything is now in the arms of peaceful darkness. Let these mysteries slowly fall into sleep, and see you in the next stories.